guys that take you guys' advice, and sometimes, it ruins their life.
What would men do if they begged you for advice?
Again, I'm not in the business of telling men what to do,
But I think you kind of are.
Well, what percent of women do you think are marriageable?
I think you're skirting the issue.
People are not going to return to marriage until you make the institution more fair.
Well, what they'll do is they'll return.
Yeah. Doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what I say. You guys have been preaching marriage for a decade.
Yep.
And the rates of marriage have still been going down. Why? Because the cost is too high and the quality of women is too low. How do you fix it?
Do you want to get married?
Hi, this is Sarah from the Keepers at Home channel, back to you with another video. This time we're reacting to Michael Knowles and Just Pearly Things debate the necessity of marriage in this present society. So just for a little background, Michael Knowles is one of the podcasters on the Daily Wire. He produces content. His worldview is Christian or Catholic worldview. So he's the conservative voice in the discussion. While Just Pearly Things is a member of the Manosphere Red Pill community, she strongly discourages marriage. So in the last video, I talked a little bit about the red pill. She would be on the other end of the red pill. They strongly discourage marriage. They highlight what's happening in marriage in America, where if a marriage ends, that men have absorbed the negative consequences of a divorce more than a woman. So while what she is saying is true, that in a divorce they err on the side of the woman, because historically women could not provide for themselves, and certain women who are stay-at-home mothers, they are employed in the household, so many of their former career skills are deemed obsolete and they haven't worked in years. So it would take a lot of effort to be marketable and go back into the job market. So in that case it would be warranted. But in the case where two people are working, one of the people, the woman, most likely earns less than a man, she would still walk away with 50% of the assets and possibly alimony and child support. So while part of what she says is true, what does that mean for marriage as a whole? Should men not enter marriage? Okay, so that was a foundation of the debate.
There is basically parity between men and women. So there are enough wives.
Okay, well then I'm sure you'll see a spike in the men signing up.
No, I agree that there's a great deal of selfishness and liberalism, but I think that's the view that you're articulating, and the view of the red pill people is basically a view that presumes a liberal, secular, individualist anthropology that is contrary to natural reason and the flourishing of men.
No, I would disagree with that.
How am I wrong? You're saying men ought to just pursue their own interests regardless of, say,
I think
nature.
When you have a smoking gun, too, I mean, that's essentially what it, like, I tell you these stories and you just say, sign up anyways.
I'm saying be prudent. But I'm saying be prudent in everything in life. You could get in a car and get in a car accident because of the other day, a teenage girl driver, another girl hit me while I was driving. Yeah, but I'm not saying don't get in a car. I'm saying
but if I get into a car and I see 30% of people crashing, I'm not getting into that car, regardless of the 10% of people that succeed.
But then even further, to use your airplane analogy, I guess the difference is getting on an airplane and going to Hawaii would be a nice thing to do, and I might like to do it sometime. Getting married and having children is not merely a nice thing to do that I might, in my subjective preferences, like to engage in, but it is an aspect of my nature. It is an aspect of my purpose to which I am aimed. That's why I say.
Do you think men's masculinity comes from marriage?
I think men's masculinity and virility comes from their nature as men.
Do you think, but you don't think it comes from marriage?
I think that marriage fulfills a man's purpose, and in as much as he is more a man, the more he fulfills his purpose.
You think marriage is a man's purpose?
I think that, man's ultimate purpose is to know God and to serve him in this world and enjoy him forever in eternity.
Okay. It wouldn't be
subsidiary aspects of that would be, for lay people, for instance, to get married, which is a symbol of Christ's love for his church, and to... But even, taking religion. But I'm asking,
can I get a yes or no? Do you think?
Well, I'm trying to explain to you, the answer to the question you're asking. But if you say, what's a man's purpose? My purpose in this conversation is to talk to you.
Okay.
That's one purpose. A purpose is also to...
So as you can see in the first clip, Michael Knowles lays out a great foundation of why marriage is the physical representation of Christ's love for the church. Marriage is prescribed by the Bible. In Proverbs 18:22, it says, "Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor from the Lord." So you have favor when you get married. In 1 Corinthians 7, verse 2, it says, "To avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband." Now, we're living in a society where unbelievers can enjoy the same blessing and the same favor by entering into a marriage as well. It's not just relegated to Christians, it expands to others as well from different backgrounds, different religions. So marriage is a good thing for society. The more married people you have, the more positive contribution. The children are being raised not in dysfunction, but in a loving environment. And so you find that children who are raised, and I'm not saying every marriage is good. Everybody should seek to work on their marriage. But marriage, when you are in obedience to God, gives that child an example of what marriage is supposed to be. So you have a generation of people who have never seen what marriage is to be or realize the beauty and the blessings of marriage.
Hear an answer from any of them is that, because I agree with 95% of their criticisms, as you point out, the family courts and it's how it's stacked against men and so on and so forth. What's the other option? Like, okay, we agree with all that. So then men should just be alone and give up on their bloodline and die?
Old dead thinkers. But because I think they had something right that will help to guide us through this very confused modern time. The way that you are describing marriage seems to be from an unmoored perspective.
And what?
Unmoored, meaning not grounded in something. Meaning it's a little subjective. It's a little wishy-washy. Men can do whatever they like. You pick. Some people have a different purpose.
That's not what I said.
I thought you said men can do whatever they like. Then I'm not going to I think you took issue with me for saying that I was coming to a moral judgment about how men.
No, I think that every man has to decide for himself. But I wouldn't recommend, say, like.
How should he decide?
Following, in an ideal world, following God and His purpose.
Right. So, following God and how do we come to know our purpose?
I mean, I think following God typically meant.
How do we follow God?
Going to church every Sunday. Praying. I think there's ways that you can studying the Bible. But I'm not like a preacher.
You're not. The thing you keep leaving out. I agree. All those things are good to do.
Yeah.
The thing you keep leaving out is reason. And it's the thing you keep taking issue with me, where I keep saying marriage is a rational act.
It was. I don't know if it is now.
But even though the laws are bad and the politicians are dummies, even still, it's a rational act over and above the qualities of the state because of human nature, because men and women are different, because we are a rational creature, so we can, perceive of things like abstract justice. Animals can't do that.
So the big thing about the debate that I felt like was lost was the fact that Pearl states that she is a Catholic or she's Christian. I'm not sure how devout she is. I'm not sure what she's doing. But if she's professing to be Christian, she should be subject to the Bible. The big thing from the debate was the point on to avoid fornication. The primary purpose of being married is to be in obedience to God. And that was lost in the discussion. And that should have been it. Why get married? To be in obedience to God. If your flesh is burning, if you fall in that category where Paul said you cannot be celibate like Paul in full devotion of your life to Christ, then you would fall under that category. And that is what was missing. Now, what's the alternative? He asked several times, what was the alternative? The alternative is you will have a generation, if people are not getting married, more generations of people who haven't seen what marriage looks like. It's just going to be a foreign concept. The Satan seeks to destroy the institution of marriage. So he's using bad characters like Pearl, Rollo, other members of the manosphere to discourage others from getting married, so that more people are not in obedience to Christ. More people will be falling away, possibly to eternal destruction. So that is the goal. So he asks, what is the alternative? The alternative is, if you are not living in celibacy and obedience to Jesus Christ, the alternative is you will be watching videos, explicit content, filling your mind with filth, going in, not being satisfied with that filth, seeking out more filth, going down and down and down to the layers of that filth till you have something that is completely filthy, that America is the #1 consumer of this filth. Okay. Secondly, if that's not the option, and it could be or, the other option is fornication. You're not in obedience to Christ. You're fornicating in perpetuity. That is not obedience to Christ. Long term is still not marriage. So there are certain cases where you can be spiritually married. For example, there was a point in time in this nation where marriage was dissolved for slaves. They said they're no longer married. So the slaves, what they would do is get married anyway, risking their lives for this harmony, this joining together of man and woman to be in obedience to Christ. And many of the slaves are being ministered to some slave masters. They were taught to read underground so that they could appreciate the full gospel of Christ. So they were getting married. Second of all, there was a time in the country where marriage was banned between different races could not join in marriage, and they were getting married because of obedience to Christ. The state wasn't recognizing their marriage, but certainly God was recognizing their marriage. If there comes a time in this nation where they say you can't get married, we would have to be subject to spiritual marriages. That time is not now. Now we can go file a paperwork with Justice of the Peace or get married in a church and file the paperwork and be recognized as husband and wife. Okay, these are just excuses to live in disobedience. It's disobedient, and this woman and these people are leading so many to destruction. So it's very important that we get the message of salvation out. Number one, young people are leaving the church. They're lost. Gen Z, millennials, many of them are no longer even identifying as Christians. That is a horrible problem. And so insert these bad actors, they could easily convince them that marriage is no longer a necessity anymore. What we could do as believers is make sure we train up our young, but also share the gospel with unbelievers. Okay, so that was the end of the video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Do you think that marriage is outdated, is done? Or do you think as believers we should continue to share the message of marriage? If you're not a believer, what is your reservation about marriage? Please let me know. I'd love to speak to you. Drop a comment, like, share, and subscribe.